First ever Hypercar Invitational.
Yes.
Pros versus amateurs.
What are we most looking forward to?
One of the things I want to see from the both of you, I would say very keenly, is the difference between the LaFerrari and Pista. I feel like it's almost been 4 or 5 years in development, and the new stuff should be pretty freaking phenomenal, if not the same lap time or around the same lap time.
I think it would be really fun to, like, Randy even maybe removing some of the norm for magazines and just like the off the cuff stuff that shocks you or is a little surprising or like, you know, whoa, the 918 was not as good as I remember or whatever. Just the casual stuff that is the funny little quirks that are cool to hear, you know?
You know, do you guys like salsa dancing?
Not with you.
Because
Hello.
Because I'm tall.
Because the P1 under braking really likes to shake its ass.
Yeah, we saw you doing that.
Oh, no. I mean, it really wiggles under braking.
When these cars came out, the hypercars came out, they were the definitive pinnacle of cars out there in performance. Now with the newer cars that have come out, you've got cars that have come out now that are even eclipsing these cars in terms of, you know, 0 to 60, things like that, and equivalent performance. So I'm really interested to see, after driving some of the newer cars, what the hypercars feel like today.
Here's another great comparison too, is the CGT versus the 918, 10 years of development, and you drove the Carrera GT, and how much does that really require of the driver versus the 918, how much does that mask and really benefit the driver?
So another car that's really interesting, just from a weight distribution perspective, is the Huayra. This is transmission, right? So all these cars have pretty heavy, at least 200 kilo transmissions hanging out the back. The Huayra doesn't. It's in the middle, and it's a single clutch, and it weighs about 40 kilograms, like 100 pounds, almost a third. And that car, first of all, has a front end like a race car. You know, that and the P1 have the best front ends. But that car is so stable. I think it's going to be the surprise of the day. It weighs significantly less than the Holy Trinity, right? Has almost as much power, and is just masses of torque. I mean, torque everywhere.
The point, though, the Pagani is much less of a committee car. It's more of a almost like a single artist has created that. It's more of the result of one vision. Whereas the larger manufacturers, the bigger they are, the more people are involved, and it can reduce errors. It can make a car less likely to have something really that doesn't work as well. But it also reduces the brilliance a little bit because you don't have the peaks of anything amazing, because everything has to be just polished, more polished. The other manufacturers, and the bigger they are, the more I think this is the case, they build a car that they can sell. They have, I think, a different object.
That appeals to the masses compared to appealing to
a wider
the
audience.
manufacturer.
And that's what's so cool about these small manufacturers.
The engineers are saying, we want to do this. We want to get it here. We want to, you know, put this technology into it. But then, you know, somewhere along the line that gets capped because nobody's going to buy it because it'll cost too much or whatever.
That makes it very interesting. We don't really know as much what we're going to get there.
We have expectations, but it's kind of the wild card, really, of the group. We'll see how this amazing piece of artwork compares to these other, you know, we're going to call them production cars because they're produced by a production car company, but these other production cars, right, that every kid in America has a poster of one of these 4 cars hanging in their bedroom, right?
So I have another question, though. So we have a GT3 Cup today, right? And Road Atlanta's a big boy track with a nice big back straight. The hypercars pretty easily reach 170, 180, right? Then you got to bring them down from speed. And relatively, though, you relatively tiptoe through the corners. You just can't carry that same level of momentum through the turns. What do you think the Cup car we have here today will do on slicks versus hypercars on road tires?
Well, race cars are made for the racetrack, and there's a huge advantage to that. There aren't all the compromises of basically a high-performance luxury street car. So I think that car is going to be the fastest. On the other hand, I think I beat the Cup car with a GT2 RS a couple months ago. Okay. So a lot of it comes down to tires. The tire that each car has is going to be so important for its lap time.
Well, I mean, kind of a good example. Remember, we were running World Challenge touring car back in the early 2000s, and I had a 996 GT3 when it first came out. And one of the things I liked with that car, so you want to talk about the comparison, the GT3 was a 996 GT3 was a heavy car. The touring car was a light car that only made 300 horsepower at the most. Lap time wise, they were very similar, but they did it in two different ways. So I think that's what we're going to see with the Cup car. That car, it's a 991.1.
991.1, right.
Cup car.
But there's a power, you talked about the 2RS, there's a power is power. And when you got 250 horsepower, more than a Cup car does, your speed down the back straight is the great equalizer in that. I also think you have cooler conditions too. So maybe tire temps favor the hypercars, the street cars, more than they do the race cars today, especially in the early morning. So that's something to be aware of as well.
Well, I think lap time wise, I think we probably see something very similar to a Cup. The Cup's capable of like 1:25 around the track. I think in the hypercars, if we look at the data, the cornering speed's going to be down compared to the Cup. But the reality of it is the lap time won't be significantly different.
I think recently we did a nighttime test. I didn't have the guts to even hold the gas on the LaFerrari after turn 9. It got scary. 175, you're like, oh my gosh, this is enough. I actually was using braking zone at 300 feet, right?
Yeah.
So you were doing 175?
And that car, it felt like well before the 300-foot marker I was putting on the brakes hard. And they're amazing brakes, and LaFerrari is completely stable under braking. It's amazing, right? What are you doing? Where are you braking in the Carrera GT? I'm sorry, in the GT Cup at that level?
You're probably going to see braking somewhere around the 300. It may be just a little bit in front of it, depending today with the cold weather. So one thing that's interesting, like cars of this performance level, I haven't seen that big of a difference of where you brake with them. Especially if you're getting the most out of the braking system. The one thing with the Cup, typically it's a non-ABS car. So attacking the brake zone, you're not as confident as like you may be in the LaFerrari, right? But I think it's still going to be somewhere around that 300 mark level with all the cars today. Again, you go to the 918, where it's 800 to 1,000 pounds lighter. The 918 is 3,800 pounds. Cup cars, 37, yeah. Cup cars, 2,800 pounds.
Yeah.
I think with us in it, they'll be with 2,800, yeah.
With me, it's 3,000, but we won't talk about that.
Yeah, Sasquatch over here. But no, I mean, honestly, I think that's where that ability, and also having a race suspension, because they're not engineering a Cup car to be on the street. You've got a stiffer suspension. You've got racing shocks that are in it. They handle being able to do more on a racetrack than a typical street car. But I think we're still going to see some similarities, even with any of the hypercars that we're out there with today. I think we'll still see some similarities of how we can drive them, very similar to like we would say the Cup. I think trail braking wise, it'll be pretty close. The Cup car being the least horsepower of all the group, we should be able to go full power a little bit sooner with it. And also it's also got a lot stickier rubber underneath it.
Oh, yeah.
So
And a lot more wing. I just think the Cup car is going to have far more grip. It's a race car. It's light. It's got a real wing. It's got sticky tires. All the hypercars are on DOT level tires, right? And you said the Carrera GT. John has the Pilot Super Sports, which is like a pure street tire. It's not even the R style. Well, I mean, what's the most aggressive tire on the hypercars? Trofeo R. a good DOT tire, but still no match for a real racing slick.
Yeah.
It's a different world. So I think you'll find the grip levels are mind-blowing.
I'm really excited about which of these cars has like soul to it and quirks and genuine enjoyment. That's a little bit different than soul. That's
That's called the devil.
fear of death. Yeah, it's called a demon inside it. But like for me, that's something that's really exciting. You know, as a pista, so good now that you know you're almost drawn back to the hypercars because there's actually more curiosities and a little bit more flair in them.
Think about this. They're all actually visions of one or two people. If you start with LaFerrari, it's Flavio Monzoni and Simoni pushing the limits of what they can do. If you talk about the Porsche, it's Frank Walliser and Andreas Pruninger pushing the limits of what their GT division can do. To me, McLaren, when they produced the P1, it was like Pagani because they were a small shop. It was Ron Dennis with a vision, Chris Goodwin, the driver, and Frank Stevenson, the designer. The three of them really pushed to come up with a car. I think the 720S is a much more production, mass-produced car, which might be faster than the P1, but this was still produced when they were kind of boutiquey. So each one has a
So they
flavor.
probably all have a flair.
They have a flavor of being boutiquey in what they made. I mean, 918 is still a lot of cars, but the other two are 350 and 500. So they're still in the smaller realm, and they were custom produced in custom shops with custom tubs with custom people. So I think each one's going to have an interesting.
You know what? The P1 just has the giggle factor. You're accelerating and it makes like 4 different sounds. You've got engine, you've got turbos, you've got wastegate like right above you, and you're accelerating and it's going, and it's just doing all this awesome stuff. And
You don't want to do so much stuff.
and you're coming, and you realize you're just coming out of the pits, and you're like, oh my God, what else is gonna happen, right?
Yeah, the noises it makes, you're going, holy cow, I didn't know a car could do that.
That's
And
exciting, though. It's just
Well,
noises coming.
yeah, and it's funny because, you know, one of the big complaints whenever, so, you know, if you think about it, when the P1 came out, they had the 12C, and I think they had just released the 650S about that time. And the big complaint of those cars was they didn't make any noise. They're boring to drive, right? I think when I first met you guys, that was one of y'all's complaints over it.
These aren't made for the masses, but yet they're features of those cars that get homologated into the cars that are produced for the masses. So you see some of the design aspects of these cars falling down and trickling down into the production cars. You look at the Carrera GT with the raised center console, and you see that in the 918, and you can just. It's sort of cool to make that link, and you can even see that in the newer cars, the newer production cars, how they're taking some of the cues from these cars. So while these cars weren't produced for the masses, the masses get the benefit of these cars and what they were able to achieve.
I'm ready to go grab some keys.
Should we put it in? Should we put it in?
Yeah, let's do this.
Put it in.
Have a great day, guys.
What do we say?
There you go.
All right.
Yeah.
What do we say?
Hypercar on 3?
Hypercar Invitational.
Hypercar.
Hypercar Invitational.
Really big word.
Hypercar.
2, 3,
Hypercar!